Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we'll look at factorizing and solving quadratic binomials. So what am I talking about? Well, a quadratic equation always has an x squared term. A binomial means that it has two terms. So we might be solving something like x squared plus 6x is equal to 0. This is a quadratic equation, and it's a binomial, as I said, because there are two terms. So the way that we're going to solve quadratic equations like this is factorize and use the null factor law. So the way that we factorize binomials is different to how we factorize trinomials, which we'll do in a later video. So there are two methods we're going to go through: highest common factor and difference of two squares. So these are both methods used when it's a binomial. So you use highest common factor when there's an x in both terms usually, and difference of two squares, it has to be a square, perfect square minus another perfect square. So the idea here is we'll have one side equal to 0 in the equation, we'll factorize the expression, and then use the null factor law. So to answer this question up here, there's an x in both terms, so we're going to use highest common factor. So this is how you do it. You take the highest common factor and put it outside the brackets. And then you divide each term inside the brackets by the highest common factor. So x squared divided by x, and then 6x divided by x. So if I were to expand this expression, I would get that. So now it's factorized. I've written it as something times something equals 0. We use the null factor law. Either the first thing is equal to 0, or the second thing is equal to 0. And if x plus 6 equals 0, x equals minus 6. How easy is that? So that was for x squared plus 6x is equal to 0. Let's look if I had something like x minus x squared equals 0. Well, there's an x in both terms, so I take out highest common factor. So the highest common factor is, again, x. So what do I times by x to get x is 1. What do I times by x to get negative x squared is x. Null factor law, either the first thing equals 0, or the second thing equals 0. And if 1 minus x equals 0, x just equals 1. They are the two solutions to this equation here. So let's look at some examples for difference of two squares. So let's have something like x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. This is difference of two squares because it's a perfect square minus a perfect square. So we already have one side equal to 0. So what we're going to do is factorize. Now, how you do factorizing difference of two squares, you get two brackets, square root the first, square root the second, one gets a plus, one gets a minus. So using the null factor law, if the first thing equals 0, that means x plus 2 equals 0, then x equals minus 2. Or the second thing equals 0, so we have x minus 2 equals 0, and x equals positive 2. So the two solutions to this equation here are positive 2 and minus 2. So let's look at something like this. So now we've got 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. This is difference of two squares because 4 and x squared are perfect squares. 9 is a perfect square. Perfect square minus a perfect square. So we're going to do the same thing we've just been doing. We're going to factorize it. So we square root the first thing and put it in both brackets. We square root the second thing and put it in both brackets. One gets a plus, one gets a minus. So the null factor law says either the first bracket equals 0. So to solve this, subtract 3 from both sides and divide by 2. So that's one solution. And then the other solution, if 2x minus 3 equals 0, we just add 3 to both sides and divide by 2. So the two solutions here are minus 3 over 2 and 3 over 2. So now we're going to look at an example where we actually need to use both of these methods. So let's say we have the equation 2x squared equals 98. So this is a quadratic equation because of the x squared term, and we've got two terms, 2x squared and 98. So we need to have one side equal to 0. That was done for us in all the previous ones. So in this one, we're going to need to make one side equal 0. We're going to subtract 98 from both sides. We need one side to equal 0 so we can use the null factor law. So now that I've done that, I need to factorize this expression here. So the problem is 2 is not a perfect square, nor is 98. But both of these terms, this one and this one, have a common factor of 2. So I'm going to take out the highest common factor of 2. So what do I times by 2 to get 2x squared is x squared. What do I times by 2 to get negative 98 is negative 49. So now we have something in the brackets that is difference of two squares. X squared is a perfect square, 49 is a perfect square. So I'm going to leave the 2 alone and just factorize what's in the bracket. So difference of two squares. Square root the first, square root the second, 1 gets a plus, 1 gets a minus. So now we can use the null factor law. It turns out this 2 out the front doesn't affect the solution at all. Either x plus 7 equals 0 or x minus 7 equals 0, which means x equals 7. And they are the two solutions. And we're done. All right, thanks so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.